Welcome, horror fam, to HHN 365, a Halloween Horror Nights podcast. My name is Mike, and as always, I'm here with my co-host Duff. Just Duff. That's not as always, but just Duff.
Just Duff. Just
Yeah.
Duff. Not as always, but we've done it once recently. So
Yeah.
but,
On today's show, we will discuss what properties we would like to see return at HHN in our main segment. But before we get to that, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, you can find us at HHN365. And on TikTok, you can find us at HHN365pod. We have an amazing Discord community. The link is in the description if you'd like to join us there. And we have a merch shop at HHN365.com. You can always join the discussion at 407-906-4134 by leaving a voicemail. So we have some news and things to get to before we get to our main segments. Duff, what's going on in the world of HHN?
Yeah. So first on our end, we had another YouTube Live. Just wanted to thank everyone for coming out, participating. It was very engaging. Always a pleasure chatting with everyone. So appreciate you guys coming out. Into the real HHN world, however, we of course, as always, have some Murdy tweets.
Murdy tweets.
That's
all I got. I'm not going to do the whole thing. Just just the one.
We can't fully do it. We can't.
Yeah, it is her thing.
There's only a couple this time, but something. Kind of the big thing that happened with Murdy over this past week since we've recorded is basically someone said the event wasn't scary on Twitter, is the best way to put it. The event's not scary anymore, Mike or John. I mean, you might agree, Mike.
Don't wrap me up in this.
But John, the event's not scary anymore. And John Murdy said, well, that's a focus this year. And then the other person kind of doubled down and like, I didn't say it's not fun, but it's not scary. And then John, with a little attitude, was like, as I said before, that's the focus this year. So John Murdy really trying to stick it to us that they will be focusing on the scares this year. However, is that anything more than what a creative director will say about the event any year?
Right. I was going to say, I think that might just be the original tweet of that was like, that's the focus every year. But then he decided to take out every year and just put this year.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he just maybe edited him himself and saying like, well, we try to make it scary. So, yeah.
Every single year, he talks about completing his house treatments, and there's always one that he's like, "This is going to be the scariest house you've ever seen," which that's not a knock to him. He's here to also promote the event. And what creative director is going to be like, "Yeah, the houses aren't going to be very scary, but you should still come to this haunt." No. This is what they do. This is what you have to do. You have to say our horror event will be scary because that's the point.
Right.
So I don't think it really means anything. I don't expect it to noticeably be like a much scarier event because of this. It just sounds like the talk that he should be talking.
Right.
But then he was also asked, will we see a physical/digital release of the Nightmare remixes for the Weekend House? And will Slash's recent Universal Monster scores be released on streaming? He answered, it's up to Abel whether he wants to release them or not. Slash's music tends to eventually get released. So if you did not know, in last year's House, the Weekend Nightmare Trilogy, there were different mixes of some of the Weekend songs and even some small tidbits from the new album. So does that get released? I would guess not. I don't see why the Weekend and his team would have any interest in releasing that. For Slash's side, you may know that he released a Slash's Music of Horror Nights vinyl last year. So obviously last year's house that he scored, not on that vinyl yet. So I assume they're going to do like an updated version, maybe after a couple years. And then maybe it ends up on like Spotify and stuff too.
Cool. It looks like we have some rumors as well for.
Yeah. This is mainly Orlando-based. It actually might be all Orlando-based, but there's some interesting stuff in here, to say the least. So we're going to start here with the old 11 or even 12 house rumor for Orlando. You may remember that one of the insiders that was kind of pushing this behind it was Legacy. Uh, Specifically, had at one point said had heard that we'd get 12 houses. At the time, we looked at this because we had 10 house permits, but 24B, which has been used as a house location since 2014 now consistently, did not have a permit. Um, However, at this point, as long as we've gone without a permit, it seems likely that 24B will be used for something else, whether that's queue space, break space, not HHN related. We don't know, but probably leaning that it's not going to be a house at Horror
Right.
Nights this year.
Right.
Um,
At this point, I think if it was going to be a house, we would have a permit at this
yeah,
point. I think this.
exactly. And I'm actually going to talk about why I think that really makes sense after we get into a little bit more of this here. Because Legacy has now come out, and I will say, to his credit, he kind of says this is kind of uh, a way to cope and like just kind of a theory that he's working with to make it make sense. So I will say he's not like 100% backing this by any means, but it is something he had heard. Um, the reason we have not gotten a permit inside 24A is because Insidious the Further would just be repeated, which immediately I just don't buy that.
Yeah, that's never happened. Immediately the year next, that has
Mm.
not happened outside of COVID on Orlando or in Orlando, right? That has never happened.
I mean, it's only happened if you take COVID out, obviously, in HHN Light. It's only happened once ever that something has just returned as is. Only once. In American Werewolf in London, 2013, 2015. That's it.
Right. And that
And
was there was yeah, a year gap in there. Like,
yeah,
so it
and it was
didn't.
kind of considered a flop too. So simply because it returned, because we're kind of spoiled. Let's be honest. This is just what we come to expect from HHN is not repeating the same house. I mean, until somewhat recently, they weren't really repeating properties at all either, like period. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems strange
It
that
seems
they would.
strange. I do think Insidious was very popular. And I think if there was any property that I could see them just being like, oh, well, let's just try this again, and do, extend this one more time, it would probably be that, because they can, they I don't know how the deals work or whatever, but I mean that clearly it clearly worked for them, and I
Mhm.
think it would work for them one more year. I don't think people would sour on it if th- that quickly. I think it was so popular that I think people would enjoy it. Unlike most houses, if it returned exactly, I think it would sour. People would sour on it very quickly. I think this one has a chance of people liking. That being said, I don't think they would do this.
Yeah, I mean, even an American Werewolf in London was at the time considered maybe the best IP they've ever done, and still, after a year off, people were like not having it.
Yeah, I think
So
you're right.
I think
You're right.
the fan base here is just spoiled,
It
and
is.
like it's because of how HHN treats the event. Like it's a good thing, but it's just how it is. Now, kind of into why I also don't think the whole you don't need a permit thing, that angle doesn't make much sense. One, technically, the not needing a permit thing does have some historical backing to it, and that's from HHN Light into HHN 30. So 2020, they filed the permits for all those houses. However, they did not need to refile or make any updates to the permits that we could see publicly to keep them there through 2021. So, yeah, maybe there's a possibility you leave it completely unchanged, no construction needed, then whatever, no permits needed. However, there is a permitting thing that makes this seem very unlikely, and that is that they're every year they file permits, and they typically come in at different times. The construction house permits, and there are a ton of other smaller unrelated permits that we don't ever talk about because the construction ones are the main ones that get discussed. But typically, what they do is once every single house permit has been filed, they will then go and at the same time submit the permits for the temporary power for those houses, all on the same day, each house individually. Now, they did this already this year in March. For the 10 houses we have, they released 10 temporary power permits. Now, we know as these are temporary power permits, these do need to be resubmitted. This isn't just for construction, this is for literal power usage for a specific time period. The only time in the past that we can see that they have not submitted these all the power permits at the same time is for Hell Block Horror, which we know is a very late change. So if they knew ahead of time that Insidious would be staying, why have we not seen the power permit for 24A?
Right. So that pretty much is saying that we have our 10. These are our 10.
Yes,
The rumors for 11 or 12 are just, it's not going to happen.
correct. I will say, where there's smoke, there's fire. And next year's an anniversary year. Maybe. Maybe we get our 11. Who knows? Um, but I think right now I'm on the side that, yeah, we're getting 10 houses this year. I assume you're at that point too.
I am too. I mean, I don't remember. I think I don't remember what I said publicly on and with what I thought.
I
If
think you
11,
said 11. I think
I
you
think
said
I
11.
said 11, but honestly, my gut kind of told me like, do we like what is the benefit of them to have a 11th house? Like we've been running this event at this point on 10 for for as long as most people can remember. Um,
28 would be the first year of 10.
right. So it's been quite a while. Um, like 10 is a nice round number. For them to do 11, there would just have to be a reason, and no one could give me a reason
I,
as
I,
to why.
I think the main reason would to be obviously spread out the crowds. I think last year was not a good example of why that needs to happen, though.
You're right.
Like,
Yeah,
I think you have more of a shot if you go back a few years. Like, oh yeah, we need to spread these crowds out more. 11th house, please. Um, I don't know from what we saw last year that seems necessary. I know people complained about the weights, but people complain about the weights every year. I don't believe this was as highly attended as other years. Like, there's less of a reason to add 11th house, technically. I still think there are benefits. Is it financially beneficial to them, though? That's the big thing. That no matter what, if you had an 11th house, I think operationally, for like guest flow, great. It would help a lot. But it has to benefit Universal financially for them to make that call.
right. Exactly. Exactly.
Are we there yet? I don't know, but we'll see. I think it's definitely something they probably consider. Um, and one day we will see it happen, but it doesn't seem like that'll be this year.
Yeah, especially with just like staffing and like they already need to up their staffing so much for Epic opening. It just didn't feel like to me like that they were going to also expand the staffing on HHN at the same time, like and try to hire more people already when they've
Mhm.
just gone this giant hiring um spree.
It really feels like almost the worst year possible for them to do it, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I mean, if anything, this would be the year that we see them to just try to rest on their laurels, and which is what I think we saw a little bit of last year as well. I think this year might be on the same track.
Mhm.
Hopefully, it's only these next couple of years, and that by like you said, the anniversary that we start to ramp up again.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, because you're talking at that point, Epic will have been open for over a year. It should be seeing, obviously, not made its money back, but it's going to be bringing money in, and
And
you
bringing
know, don't
people
have to
in,
worry as
and
much
yeah,
about.
exactly.
Yeah. So hopefully by next year, Epic shouldn't really be a factor at all. as far as HHN goes.
Yeah.
That's actually all we had for news and rumors. Just kind of those couple things. Still kind of moving slow. And I think, honestly, a lot of that might have to do with Epic. It's kind of the main
Yeah.
concern and main point of discussion right now, whether
Yeah, I
that's
think it's going to
within
be for a
Universal,
while.
within the
Yeah.
community. Yeah. Um, I don't. I think we talked about this on the live stream, so I want to ask you: when do
Uh-huh.
you think we get our first announcement, and is that affected by Epic's opening?
I think we get I do. I think we get it a little bit later this year. And I think we get it maybe a couple of weeks after the official opening of Epic. So I think we
Hmm.
maybe get it early June.
Okay. I think all of us kind of went a similar but opposite direction. I think we all said we're going to get one that's pretty early, like a March into early April, maybe, just to get something out. And then we don't see anything for a while because of Epic. And Epic gets its nice, like, 2-month period where it's all about Epic.
Well, if we're gonna get something in March, we better get it soon.
Yeah, I know, right? Late March. I think I said April, and they both said, I think late March, early April, to be more specific on
So
their
they
end.
think they think we're getting an announcement like not
In the couple,
this
within
coming
a few
week, but
weeks. Within a few
within.
weeks. Yeah.
I don't see. I don't have my ear to the ground as much as them, but I have not seen the ramping up that we usually get with when there's an announcement coming
Hmm.
soon. But I
I
don't know.
think I will say typically, if they didn't do it the past couple years where they do the initial tease with an announcement, but they used to do that, right? The initial tease used to come with like a big house announcement too.
Right.
Um, so if they do it that way, I guess we wouldn't see too much ahead of time and it would almost come out of nowhere. Like their social media starts to get active like a week before, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll see. We'll see. I think it is very possible they just ignore the event until after Epic. That makes things very weird for the announcement season and how they have to lay it out, but it's a possibility for sure.
It's a possibility. Yeah. We'll see.
But with that, I think we can get into our main segment then, Mike.
All right. Well, um, again, our main segment is going to be properties we'd like to see another chance. So this can be intellectual properties. This can be Orlando original properties. Um, so just basically something that you want to see to get another chance for one reason or another. It could be something you really liked, or something that you think that it has more potential because they didn't utilize it 100% the way that you wanted. So basically, something that you would like to see return for one reason or another. I kind of bounce back and forth based on my reasoning. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I did. I did the same. I actually came into it with the intention of doing. I want to see them do it better, but I kind of slowly devolved into I didn't get to see it, or it's been a long time and I want to see it again.
I have all three of those reasonings.
Yeah, yeah. But do you want to kick us off with your first choice?
Sure. Mine I think I have mentioned before. But it's been a while since we've done something like this. We have done this sort of segment I think very early on in our history, but it has been a while. But
Hmm.
I believe this is something that I have mentioned at least a couple of times to people. Is I would really like to see, this is a from a year that I did not get to attend, but I have think for the most part I think it had a pretty well reception. I think obviously some people didn't love it, but overall I think it was seen as like a pretty solid house, and that is, I would like to see the return of The Shining.
Oh,
I think
okay.
that this is just an iconic horror property. I think that you could do probably 75% of kind of kind of like the hits, so to speak, where you show the classic scenes, and then you could potentially there is a sequel that you can dive into with Doctor Sleep, where you could really start get some new stuff that people haven't seen as well. If you kind of do like the Shining Doctor Sleep mashup, where it's 70% The Shining stuff that we've potentially seen already, maybe different scenes from that weren't in the original house, but also kind of the classic scenes, as well as you dive in to Mike Flanagan's Doctor Sleep, which is, I think, a movie that was well critically acclaimed. It just kind of came out at a weird time.
Mhm.
And it didn't do that well. But Mike, since it's come out, Mike Flanagan has only got more and more and more popular. I think he has a huge fan base. I think seeing another Mike Flanagan property at the event after kind of Hill House kind of was a bit of a letdown would be fun. I'd like to see The Shining return.
Yeah. So when you first said it, my thought was I actually really liked the house. I thought they did a great job with the property. I don't know how they differentiate enough. The second you brought in Doctor Sleep, I'm in. I think those two could mesh so well. Sometimes it's tough to take multiple properties or sequels and adding them without it feeling a bit jarring. I think it would be pretty smooth sailing for those two.
Right, right. So they mesh pretty well together.
Yeah, yeah, I'm in. It's not one I would jump to immediately, just because for me, it's one of those properties that I thought would be tough, and I was like, oh, damn, I liked it. They did well, but I like that little touch of adding Doctor Sleep to really have it stand out and make it different.
All right. What is your one?
So with my first one, you're going to see where I did start on the train of thought of didn't love it, and I want to see it come back better. And that's going to be one I've brought up many times actually, and that's Depths of Fear. It is
Mm.
a house that was top of my hype list going into HHN 29. It is a concept I'm truly excited about. It's a house that, even though I did not love the execution, I still have super fond memories of it just because of the atmosphere it put me in, even if the house as a whole didn't really do it for me. Because it's just something I'm so interested in. And I will say it's grown on me a bit when I look back on it overall. It does not become a top tier house by any means, but we're talking like it was at like 9 that year, and I think if I look back, I'd probably put it more at like 7 or 8. So, I've been a little kinder to it. But I really want to see them take that concept. It could literally just be a Depths of Fear sequel too. I think everything about the concept, the story, is perfect. I think it was fully execution for me that was lacking. So you could literally just go Depths of Fear 2, or whatever clever subtitle you want to add in, and I'd be fully on board. And I would be shocked if it's not better. Shocked.
Yeah, this is an interesting choice. I think it's a little bit of a deep cut. I think if it actually happened, I think it would people would be like, "What the fuck?" Depth we're getting a depths of fear because it was a very polarizing from a really very popular year.
Hmm.
It was kind of one of those that was low on most people's list with a few loud notable people who had it
Jonathan.
very high up. I think it was one of those where it was like, um, and it's not like where it's like Nightingales where you had the other you know if Nightingales comes back it would make sense. Okay, the last time we got it wasn't very popular, but at least we have this running property where it makes kind of sense that we're getting Nightingales again eventually. um
Hmm.
Depths of Fear would be that. Being said, I do think there's a lot of potential here of being good, because I mean it's just it has a lot of things that I think people really enjoy, and it it doesn't have to reinvent the wheel too much to be a really fun, exciting property.
Hmm. Yeah. Again, I think everything people are looking for is kind of the perfect way to put what it is. It had the gore, it had the camp, it had the scenic. It just, as a house, wasn't cohesive enough to work for me. Um, just give them a crack at it, and I'm sure it would be an improvement. I'm sure.
Cool. Well, my next one I think is on a lot of people's lists. I think this is. I think um if like when I say it, you people, you it'll make sense. I think it's not necessarily one that that is like, it's not like the scarecrow or the reaping or something, but when I say it, you'll be like, okay, yeah, that's definitely something that I think a lot of people have mentioned before, and that is Ghost Town. I think a western. It's been quite a while since we've had a full western motif town. I think the stand one of the standout areas of Slaughter Cinema 2 was the western um, scene. I think this lends itself well to basically be a standout property every year when you're going to have big giant sets with a lot of character building. I think there's hard to go wrong with a ghost town house, and I would love to see them to do something again. And there's a lot of things you could do differently to make this work and still be fresh and fun.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great choice. I mean, it's a house that is a sequel, and like people don't know it's a sequel just because it's something that could stand so well on its own.
Right, yeah, so this
Um,
would be the third, because this,
yeah,
yeah,
and I think they could just pull that off again, right? Like similar kind of setting, but as long as
tell a
it's kind
totally
of
different story. Yeah.
yeah, totally different story. And I think why not? Because I think to this day, one of the best scenic we've ever seen in a house. I think just across the board, it just knocked it out the entire time. So if they try to keep it at that level, I know the original was not quite like that, but I think now that would be the expectation for a Ghost Town house.
Yeah. And I mean, and they've shown that they have the ability to, they have the props back there. Um, I think it's coming eventually. I'd like to see it for sure.
Yeah, I think if take that and then do it more with what they did with like Dead Man's Pier, Blood Moon, kind of like yeah, the settings are great, but also it really feels living. Just
Right.
how it's laid out and how you can fully see through and across the
Right.
town. I guess in that case, um,
Yeah,
would be
give it to that
phenomenal.
guy. Give it to that
Would
guy.
be phenomenal. There was a little bit of that in the last Ghost Town, to be fair, but
Yeah,
I think they could take that a step further. And wow, that would be mind blowing.
for sure. All
All right,
right,
so I
what is
guess
your
I will
next one?
go with my next one. And I'm going to go with an IP that I have not seen before. It's only been to the event for a year. Um, and kind of a combination, even though I didn't see it, of I want to see it, and B, I think it could be done better. Um, that's Jurassic Park, of course.
Ooh,
Why wouldn't I bring it
yeah.
up? First of all, again, didn't see it. Like my favorite property ever, period. So I want to see it at my favorite event, of course. But also, the original approach, I don't think I'd be too interested in seeing a return. Evolution was kind of all about um, these human dinosaur hybrids, everything going wrong. No, I just want Jurassic Park. I think Jurassic Park and its horror moments could build a house on its own. I don't even
So
need it to just be like the movie. Like, yeah, you could just take the dinosaurs and the characters and however you want to do it and make it almost an original telling of that. Like you are in Jurassic Park as things go wrong. Um, there's just dinosaurs are fucking terrifying. And if you put them in a setting with the correct lighting and sound design, it'll be a fucking horrifying house.
that would be really cool. I think it would be a risky house. I think
Oh
it
yeah.
could
Oh yeah.
potentially be kind of a bit like A Quiet Place, where it
Hmm.
is, more of, you're relying on, kind of like animatronics, and you're uh making kind of the your guest kind of like take a leap of faith with like, okay, no, like this isn't going to be your traditional haunted house, but you're gonna enjoy this because this. But with something like Jurassic Park, where this is an iconic property that just most people just really love, I think they'd be willing to take that leap with them and be like, this isn't going to be the 100%. It's not going to be your pinball scare type claustrophobic esque type of house. This is going to be a bit more of a we're going to rely on animatronics and things, and it's not going to be the for me, I don't think it would be the scariest house ever, but it could had the potentially be one of the coolest houses ever.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely have to be both puppet and animatronic heavy. I think what it would have over A Quiet Place is the diversity of what those puppets and animatronics are. So that already helps a lot. Obviously,
Yeah,
you'd use
100%. You have different. Yeah,
several types of dinosaurs.
yeah,
Um, and I think A Quiet Place did have good scenic, but I think there are much more memorable locations from Jurassic Park to work with that you
yeah,
can open up and really immerse people in.
for sure. That's a
So
good. Yeah,
definitely a similar style house, like you say, though.
yeah. All right. Well, my next one I think is might come off a little bit of left field for me, but I do think that this has a potential of being a really cool one. I would really like kind of a music heavy, music focused um, house, and I think a Rob Zombie house
Oh,
um, would be a really cool one, especially if you do like what we did with Hellbilly Deluxe. You pick like an album or something, and you let him make a house similar, kind of the way that we've seen with The Weekend. Let him write an original story, HHN house around one of his albums, not necessarily one of his movies, one of his albums. I think it has a potential of being a real huge hit.
you're right. I would not have expected that from you. A little out of left field. I like it though. I don't hate it. I think I'm not the biggest fan of the Hellbilly Deluxe Zone. I don't dislike it by any means. I thought the vibes were good. But I think if you take that concept and put it in a house where it can really immerse you more and you can really work more on kind of an original take on that, that it could really succeed.
I think agree with you that the zone wasn't great, and the reason why the zone wasn't great is because it was less about telling a story and was more about making like photo ops. I feel
Yeah,
like
here's the music, here's the characters from the
right,
music, and yeah, take pictures with them.
take pictures with them.
Which, to be fair, it got us. We did. There are
His
pictures of us in Dracula.
I think, yeah, one of the only pictures of for a very long time out there is us in Dracula
Yep,
from our very first year of doing this.
yep, sure was.
But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of potential there where we could get a pretty cool house. I think um a music house just always works really well, and I think Rob Zombie is one of those guys who would really he likes haunted house. It's haunted houses is a way that he likes to tell a story, and I think he could really blow it out if he gets into this, and his like creatively part of it. This could be a really cool house.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd be down for it. And I think, like you mentioned, like kind of the weekend has hopefully opened people's eyes to like just a music house can work.
Yes,
You need someone who's a creative musician, and I think Rob Zombie definitely fits that bill. While I'm not a huge fan of his work as a director, he also is a director
right.
and also a writer. So he can be creative and could get fun with it for sure.
Yeah. I would like this much more than just seeing a House of a Thousand Corpses come back or one of his other movies. I think this would be a fun way to um, utilize Rob Zombie again. Um, and I think it would be I mean he's a very popular director.
Yeah, oh yeah. In fact, I'd argue one of the last houses I'd want to see again is House of a Thousand Corpses because I don't think you can do the house better. I think they did the property to its full potential. So I don't need to see them come back and bring a lesser version. So let them be original. Let them have fun if you bring them back.
Cool. What do you got next?
So my next one is low hanging fruit. To be fair, this is something that kind of everyone wants, and that I needed to bring up because what I've seen from it was great. And that's going to be just Freddy Krueger in general.
Oh, okay.
Had his HHN 17 house Dreamwalkers, which great house. And then also he was in Freddy Jason, of course. Uh, I don't care which form it is. I really don't. It could be Freddy versus Jason. Jason should come back to the event at some point as well. I know that can be tough with rates and everything, but still. Um, and even more so going back to like the Dream Walkers concept, obviously kind of similar. And I like the nice original take on it, but I'd be fully okay with like a just full Dream Warriors, the film house. Um, I'm actually not the biggest fan of his franchise. Nightmare on Elm Street's just not really my thing. There are a few films in there, like Dream Warriors, that I find really good. But across the board, not a huge fan. But I do think Freddy, as a character, is a great fucking fit for an HHN house. I think, especially if you lean more into kind of his one-liners and if you want to go more into his comedic shtick, that can work as well and kind of break up the monotony of what a house can be sometimes. Um, so, whatever it is, original take, a single film, a mashup of films, Freddy vs. Jason. I think it's just a character that fits the HHN formula very, very well.
Yeah, I could definitely see this happening pretty soon. It's not necessarily something that it would be on my list. Just I agree with you that it's just not one my favorite horror property. I just think I've just never gotten into it. Um, but I would rather have this than just something that that I do potentially like, but just we've seen of so many times before. It was so recently, say like The Purge or something, where it's just for whatever reason I like that property, but I we've seen it at HHN so many times recently that
Hmm.
I'd rather potentially see something like this.
Yeah, for sure. I think it also just kind of pleases a lot of people. And I think getting properties like that are necessary sometimes in general. Like you have to keep the people happy, and this is one of those properties that will absolutely keep the people happy.
Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of
That's,
people are going to be complaining about just seeing a Freddy Krueger house on the list. You know what I
no,
mean? I
you
can
know
see
he
people
is.
complain about the execution, but if you see it on the list, I think everyone would be pretty happy.
Yeah, I still think even execution wise, the vast majority of people would just see Freddy and be happy and done. They're like, yeah, I love him. He was in the house. Great, loved it. Fun.
Cool. All right. Well, I have two more left. I don't know about you, Dale.
Also, too.
Okay, cool. So my next one, again, this is just kind of comes down to something that I didn't get to see, and I think this is just the more with more time. I think this property is just kind of becoming more of an iconic movie and iconic property. I think at the time it happened, I think it wasn't quite didn't have the same iconic views, but I think just with time it's becoming kind of just a classic, and at the time they did it where it wasn't necessarily classic, but now it is kind of has that classic feel, and that is uh the Cabin in the Woods.
Ooh, okay.
I think there again there's so much to be done with the Cabin in the Woods. I think correct me if I'm wrong, the first time they did it a bit more of just kind of telling the story. I
Yeah,
think this time you could really kind of um take more of an original take on it and get some of these iconic characters that you only saw for just a second here or there, you could really flesh them out and give them a backstory, and you could potentially have something here that could be a little bit more transcendent to the movie, that could
Mhm.
potentially give the fans of the Cabin of the Woods a little bit more to play with.
Yeah, I mean, it. First of all, I thought it was a great house when it came in the first place. Um, but there's so much more you could dive into in that world for sure. I don't see why it's a property that shouldn't make a comeback. I would, I guess, I'd only question how mainstream is it at this point, and would HHN care to bring that back? Um, but for the quality of the house and would I want it? Yeah, absolutely.
So when they did it in 2013, the movie who had just come out in 2011. So it wasn't like a brand new movie, it looks like, but it looks like it was, so it had been out for about like 2 years or so,
Hmm.
looks like.
Yep. And it was definitely there was definitely a period where that was like the good modern horror film that people would go to. Um, it was very popular for a while. I just don't see it as popular anymore. Does that necessarily matter, or should it matter always? No. There's always going to be some properties that aren't quite as popular as they once were, or maybe they just weren't ever that popular, but it'd be a great house. Because sometimes you just got to make IPs that make a good house, and I think this is one of them, regardless of its current popularity. And obviously, people still know it anyways.
Yeah. So I'm going to correct what I just said. Looks like it got its festival debut in 2011. It had its wide debut April 13th, 2012. So
Hmm.
and then it came out again, and so then it was at HHN in October 2013. So about a year and a half since the movie
Yeah.
released. It came to
So
HHN.
yeah, a little removed, but not too much, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
I mean, in general,
it's
I would be on board.
me too, for sure. All right. What is your next one?
So my next one is a property that they've used twice before, but never used the version I want, and that's going to be Evil Dead. So
Ooh.
as you may know, at HHN 23, they had Evil Dead the remake, which actually great house, which is part of the reason I think they should do the original or originals. And then also Ash vs Evil Dead 27, which I wasn't a huge fan of. I know a lot of people quite enjoyed it, but I'm mainly going to use the original take of the remake of Evil Dead that they did in 2013. Uh, Listen, that movie actually, I think, as far as the original horror remakes go, great film. I think it translated really well to a house. Um, I think it's missing a bit of what you want out of just Evil Dead, though, and that's the character or characters, I should say. Um, Obviously, the original Evil Dead doesn't have so much humor or the little additional whimsy in it. So I think taking the Evil Dead as a series has got to be the way to go, right? Just kind of focus it around Ash, let him have fun. It can kind of lean a little more towards Ash vs. Evil Dead, kind of in feeling, I guess, but have the settings and places of the original franchise.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I'm just not an Evil Dead guy. I think I definitely could see how it could be very popular. It's just it wouldn't be my cup of tea, but that's okay.
Hmm.
So I don't necessarily have a bunch of to add here. But yeah, I definitely think it would be very popular.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of other people who would have this on their list too. It would be popular. Um, and I think past has shown us it can succeed. Again, I didn't love Ash vs Evil Dead, but it was actually pretty popular among the fans. And the first Evil Dead, the remake, was very popular as well. So I think it only blows up even further when you take the actual original films.
All right, well, I'm down to my last one. And this one, this one comes from the one that I think that I did get to experience, but it wasn't necessarily executed the way that I would love. And it's been a while, so I don't remember too much about it, but I remember it being not necessarily the best. But me going into this one really, really excited and then being let down, and that is I would like to see an Edgar Allan Poe house done again.
Ooh.
Back in 2011, we had Nevermore from the Mind of Edgar Allan Poe, I believe is what it was called, or
Mhm.
something very close to that. And I recall that the execution just wasn't 100% the best. I think it, from a pretty solid year, it kind of was a little bit lower on what where my final rankings ended up. But I do think there's just so much potential here. Edgar Allan Poe, there's so much that could be done. You wouldn't even necessarily have to have a. Most people wouldn't even remember that this happened before. I think if you just did almost like an original Edgar Allan Poe take, I think people would be excited about it, and they wouldn't necessarily be like, "Oh, we've seen this before," because it happened so long ago, and there's just so much different. You could make it 1,000% different than what they already did.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that would be a really fun choice. Um, I actually kind of was a fan of that 21 one. I do think for the year, though, it was definitely lower down. Not to discredit that house, though. It's just extremely strong year, obviously. Um, but obviously, there's so much to work with. There's so much to work with
Yeah,
Poe.
definitely,
I there's no reason you can't just go back to that well.
100%. All right, well, you have one more.
I do. And so my last one is going to be an original series that I have not seen and that we have not seen since my first year at the event. And it was not very good. And that's Dungeon of Terror. Uh,
Ooh,
as you know, the original HHN house, they used it multiple times to kind of bring the name back. And um, things worked a little bit different in the 90s too. But we have now not seen it since 2006, after having been kind of a mainstay at the event and making somewhat frequent returns. And it's so easy because there's no actual story you have to follow. It's more just kind of name and vibe, and you get to do whatever you want with it. And I think it's the perfect anniversary house. I know for a while in rumor season going into HHN 30, it was actually heavily rumored to be one of the like anniversary mashup houses. And
yeah,
I'd like to see that come
I
to
remember
fruition.
that.
Just a pure anniversary mashup house that falls under Dungeon of Terror.
I definitely think this could happen eventually. Um, I mean, it's been a while since we've dipped that far back. To be fair, but I think if we are going to go back that far, Dungeon of Terror is on the top of my list of things that could potentially, be brought back, be from that far back in the history. There's maybe only two or three on my list that I think has any sort of chance of coming back, and I think Dungeon of Terror is on that list.
Hmm. I am worried just based on how they looked at it. Obviously, different team now and different era. It changes a little bit. But when it came back in 2006, it had already been gone for like a decade at that point. And it seemed like, well, flopped, we're done with it. So I don't know if they'll care that kind of flop that now almost 20 years ago, but I hope that's not the case and that they would give it another shot because it's just one of those things in name is so important to the
Yeah,
event. Um, and when you're going to do a mashup, it's kind of a good uh, title to have, A, and then B, kind of that vibe. You know, it's not too constricted to what it has to be, but the Dungeon of Terror and just what's entailed within that aesthetic is a fun way to work with a mashup.
totally. All right. Well, I think that is all of our list, right?
That's all we got. I mean, I would have more, but we don't need more. We're good.
Yeah, I mean, I have some honorable mentions, but I don't need to go necessarily. We can save them for another time.
I'm sure we will do this list again down the road. It'll happen.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any voicemails?
We have no voicemails.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. As always, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at HHN365 and at TikTok at HHN365pod. We have an amazing Discord community. The link is in the description if you'd like to join us there. And we have a merch shop at HHN365.com. You can always leave us a voicemail at 407 906 4134, and we'll play it on the show and discuss it. And we will be back next week, and we will see you in the streets.